And so as a leader, it's my job to ensure that the vision is very clear and that we know where we're going and that the people that are coming on board align with that vision.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And this week, I am super excited to share with you a conversation with my friend, Staci Wright. And Staci is an incredible entrepreneur. We happen to be in a business incubator together. We're local businesswomen, which is super amazing, especially given I've built most of my business online. It's such treat to get to meet such accomplished entrepreneurs locally here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so, Staci, just welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet your community and to talk about whatever it is we're going to talk about today.
It's going to be good. So dear listener, Staci is, she's so grounded. She's so humble, but she is a serial entrepreneur. She's built and grown 6 different companies, which is just outstanding. And when I say companies, I don't mean Etsy stores. Like, these are like big, awesome companies. But what really drew me to wanting her to come join us on the show today is her current endeavor, which is actually a nonprofit. So Staci, do you want to just take a moment and share with us, tell us what the nonprofit is, be sure to share why you're doing it this way, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. I will start by saying I have had 6 startups, and if you're an entrepreneur, your line, your journey is squiggly one. So some have been successful and large, and some have not, and that is just part of the process. But I do appreciate that warm introduction. I truly love solving problems with the power of business. And I care about people. I care about humanity. I care about where we're going. And I think the easiest way to explain what Heart Profit is by talking about a story. And the story involves my sister, and it was a very personal story. My sister was a beautiful, beautiful woman. She was the valedictorian of her senior high school class. She had a tremendous amount of potential and did a lot of amazing things. She actually ran a startup and scaled it to a multi-million-dollar business. So she, in and of herself, was very capable and smart and never had an enemy in her whole entire life. But life hit her hard, as life does with all of us, and she had her share of adversity, and she ended up succumbing to alcoholism later in life. And so for the last 15 years of her life, we really watched it come apart. And it was so sad to see such enormous potential waste away. But there was one year during that 15-year come apart that she was different. That there was one year where the light came back on in her eyes, and she started getting excited about life again, and she started enjoying her job, and she would talk about her job nonstop. She loved what she was doing, and she got a promotion. She was managing people, and she actually quit drinking that year. It was amazing. And she started feeding the homeless because that's what she loved to do in her spare time. She would literally cook food in her kitchen, bag it up, take it to the park and hand it out. And that's just the person she was. And so that one year was just the highlight of all of our lives. And we were very excited to see that change in her. And when we look at that period of her life, that one year, there was one thing that was different. And that one thing was her boss. She had gotten a new boss, and that boss was one that actually cared about her people. And she took the time to connect with the people that she was leading. And my sister was fortunate enough to be one of those people. And she really got to know her. My sister's name was Jama, and the boss's name was Griselda. And Griselda would go take walks with Jama on her breaks, and she would spend time with her. And she was the one that encouraged her to apply for the promotion, because what Griselda saw in Jama was the potential to manage people, and that she had such a gracious, warm attitude and love for people. And she encouraged her to take that promotion. And she literally she was a servant leader. Griselda was a servant leader. And she said, how can I help you be successful? Because I see this in you. What do I need to do? What can we do to help you be that? And she's provided what my sister needed. And so about a year later, Griselda wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So she left. And the new boss that came in was command and control. And we watched my sister go downhill after that. And we never got her back. And we just lost Jama in January of this year.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. She's gone way before her time. But what that showed me was the enormous impact that we can have as leaders on the people we serve. And when we do take advantage of that opportunity, when we do take the time to connect human to human, and we get to know the people that we're serving, we can change the trajectory of their lives. And we spend so much time at work. How we are treated at work, how we feel about our work impacts the way we go home. And so that was one of the reasons I started Heart Profit. Heart Profit is a mission to transform workspaces and workplaces and leaders into the type of environment my sister had. The other thing that played into the starting of Heart Profit was I did a lot of volunteerism. During one season of my entrepreneurial journey, I was going through a tremendous loss. We had lost a $5 million business to a lawsuit, and there was just complete grief going on in my life. And I found that being of service to others eased my pain. We were talking about this before the show. And so I poured myself into service. Well, as I was being of service, I served on a couple of different boards. One was the child welfare board. One was a guidance center that did therapy for kids. And what I started seeing was that we had waiting lists for kids to get help, waiting lists for kids to get families in the child welfare system. That was a really sad situation. But the therapy part really got me because we had a waiting list so long that we couldn't get to all the kids that needed therapy. So I'm watching the society we live in that has a huge mental health crisis going on. And we have children that need therapy, that have been through traumatic events, that are not getting the therapy they need, which means they're going to turn into adults that have a mental health crisis. And so we're not helping the trajectory by not addressing these issues. And so I realized that we have to do something different. Humanity's just on a really bad trajectory. And if we don't do something different, this mental health crisis is going to take over humanity. We're not going to be able to do any of the things that we want to do. And I thought, how can we use as an entrepreneur, how can we use the power of business to solve this enormous social issue that we're facing? Because addiction is the number one killer of people ages 15 to 59. How can we leverage the power of problem solving that businesses provide for social impact? And that's where Heart Profit came from.
That's incredible. And, I know I'm thinking about several people in our community who are listening to this show, watching us on YouTube and hearing this story. I've helped coaches for years. You start their business, and so many get really, really frustrated with honestly, they're super motivated by the social change, just like you're talking about right now. Yeah. And it's really about, being a heart-centered person who wants to take your core genius of your empathy, your coaching capability, all of these things to change the world in a meaningful way. However, so many coaches flame out, burn out, tap out, and don't get to really realize the power of business. I love that phrase, stealing, really showing up with impact. And something that really struck me about your strategy that was really different is you went the nonprofit route. So a lot of coaches, I'm definitely a for-profit coach, full disclosure. However, that does mean that my customer generally has to be someone with means. It generally means that I am helping people and I am impacting vis-a-vis a ripple, because when people do good, they tend to do good, but you're more directly going after it by choosing a nonprofit route. Can you walk us through how you determined that was the strategy? And if somebody who's listening wants to serve an underserved community, I hear this all the time, this frustration that they can't do it because they can't get paid to do it. Can you walk us through how you're doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I actually fought for a long time, because I wanted a for-profit, because the power of business to solve problems comes from the sustainability. It comes from the revenue. It comes from the money that it's creating to be able to afford that sustainable change and that sustainable problem solving. So I was very much, this is a for-profit. This is a for-profit. And I've been doing this for like 5 years. So I stayed on the for-profit route because of that power. I wanted that power to impact change. What I realized last year, and it was just last year that I finally took the hard-headedness off of and that took the blinders off. I had an enormous amount of people that wanted to help with this organization, with this move. It's a movement. And, in a for-profit model, it doesn't make sense to volunteer. And so I had people say, well, why aren't you a nonprofit? I kept saying, because there's no power. And they're like, well, finally I looked around. I'm like, look at all these people that want to volunteer, that want to be a part of this. And part of the conversation, with the for-profit, you own it. As a person, you own it. You have control of it. You can, drive it wherever you want it to go. When you turn it to a nonprofit, you lose ownership and you don't have the control.
People don't know this. So where does the power go?
Okay, so this is interesting because it's the power of people. When you have aligned, like-minded, synergistic people, the power that comes with that is enormous. And so as a leader, it's my job to ensure that the vision is very clear and that we know where we're going and that the people that are coming on board align with that vision. And when that all comes together, it is enormously powerful. The amount of ground that we've covered in the last year, and we just became a nonprofit in October of 24. So it's just been a full year. But the amount of ground that we have covered has been amazing. And I have in volunteers about $500,000 in payroll that I would have to pay for the same people to do the same work that they're doing if it was a for-profit. So just think about that. It's just leveraging the enormity and the power of people in a like-minded way that love the mission and that are passionate about the mission, bringing them together. And the biggest, hardest part of that is being the leader of that. And how do you lead a group of people efficiently and effectively? And ironically, that's what Heart Profit teaches. It teaches about leadership and how to lead in a heart-led servant way so that the mission is accomplished and the performance is high.
So I want to loop back just real quick because I know that this is a missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. You said earlier that like one of the hard things is when you're not the owner, you're not the founder, the steward, the CEO of a for-profit, you have to let that power go. That's to a board of directors, right?
When you're a nonprofit, yes.
When you're a nonprofit, yeah. So I think a lot of people don't know that. I think a lot of people think like, oh, I can just start a nonprofit. And they don't even realize that it's like, okay, well, that's a completely different governance structure. It's no longer, right? But there's so many advantages to it, like you just said, because you have that power of the movement itself. You can use the same strategy, by the way, y'all, of having a real movement behind your for-profit as well. But to your point, who wants to volunteer for a for-profit enterprise versus somebody who's volunteering for the nonprofit, the movement? That is so super fascinating. So in terms of like the impact that you get to have, and you're still the leader, you're still the founder, you're still directing all of this, you're carrying the vision, you're jumping on the podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. So Can you walk us through like how do you actually help your customer now that you're in a nonprofit format?
Well, we still charge. So we're a revenue generating nonprofit. So our curriculum, our leadership curriculum, we actually charge for that. So that is one of the ways that that is the main way that we generate revenue for the organization is through that. So just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you can't generate revenue. It just means that any profit you have doesn't go in your pocket. The profit stays in the organization to continue the movement. So there's not anybody getting rich off of a nonprofit. Typically, traditionally, there are still nonprofits where people are making a healthy salary, but typically speaking, there's no profit sharing at the end of the year. anything that
You know,
any
that
revenue
again,
that's
that's like
generated stays.
super helpful for our listeners, right? Because I think sometimes they think that, well, if I go the nonprofit route, if I go this other way, then that means that I have to suffer.
Mm,
But that doesn't mean that. It just means that there's going to be a fair and reasonable salary, which PS, by the way, that's the way it is in a for-profit as well. Like you need to pay a fair and reasonable salary to anybody that works for the company, and it's the
yes,
same in the nonprofit. So I just
right.
love how creative this has been. Talk to us a little bit about the impact you're having with companies. So they're enrolling, they're getting your curriculum. Like, what are you really helping them to accomplish?
Mm. We're giving them their life back. We have one person that came through our curriculum. She owned a commercial janitorial company, and so all her crews were cleaning at night, and she was like having to manage everything. People were doing the minimum that they had to do, and she would go out and double check. She'd have to go out and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And she was constantly having to follow up and follow through and making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. And it was exhausting to her. She was exhausted. She was ready to throw in the towel of entrepreneurialism. And she came into the curriculum. She came into the cohort and she fully engaged. She was at every single class. She did all of the homework. She did the assignments that she was to do. And by the end of that class, literally, it was 2 months later, we had a reunion because we do it cohort style. So the cohort went through for 12 weeks, and then a couple months later, we had a reunion. And people looked at her and said, "You look completely different." She said, the reunion was at night. It was in the evening. She said, "I'm actually home with my kids having dinner," which I never could do before Heart Profit. She said, "Now, today, the way I lead my employees is that we trust each other." She said there was one person, it was the bad apple, that was causing a lot of toxicity in the whole organization. And one of the things I learned at Heart Profit is there's 5% of the population you're not ever going to be able to change. Get rid of them quick. Those are the ones that'll take everybody down. So she's like, I got rid of her. And then the ones that were left, I said, look, y'all are good people. I trust you. Here's the expectation. She started leading them with the leadership that she learned. And literally the relationships just changed completely. And that night when we had the reunion, she said, my people know that I've got their back and I know that they've got my back. And we have a good working relationship. And now I'm home with my kids, fixing dinner for my kids at night instead of running around making sure they're doing what they need to do.
Staci, this has been so generous. And thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through your story and how you help people in the very awesome and creative way that you figured out to balance out your business so it could be sustainable. Super cool. If somebody wanted to keep up with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, on any of your favorite social media, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram, you can search for Staci Renee CEO and you will find me there.
Amazing. And we'll make sure that all her links are in the show notes below, dear listener. Staci, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me, Amanda, and thank you for having these great conversations.
My pleasure. And dear listener, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you go so you don't miss another amazing episode. And we're going to be back very, very soon. So make sure if you're talking to a friend and they're like, maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe I do it another way, or maybe you just know somebody who would really like to improve their leadership skills, they should check out what Staci does. Just grab the link to this episode, however you happen to be listening, and send it to 2 or 3 of your friends via DM or through text, however you like to connect with your buddies. And then finally, if you are really loving the show, there's one thing that takes about 2 minutes and it makes a huge difference. And that is leaving a positive review. Now, make it an honest review, of course, but those reviews do such a good job of helping people decide whether they want to spend 15 or 20 minutes with us. All right, we'll see you in another episode. And until then, do what matters.